This is the Cochise County Board of Supervisors work session Tuesday, October 24th, 2023 at 11:30 a.m. Board of Supervisors hearing room, 1415 Melody Lane, Building G, Bisbee, Arizona, 85603. Any item on this agenda is open for discussion. Roll call. Crosby is here for District 1. District 2.
Supervisor English is present.
And District 3.
Supervisor Judd is here.
We have a full board. Members of the public may also attend this meeting via Microsoft Teams or computer or mobile app or via phone by calling 602-609-7513 or 888-680-6714. Conference ID 310-142-271 #. If you have trouble accessing this meeting remotely, call 520-432-9200 for direction. Work sessions are a time for county staff to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comments will not be taken. Introduction and items for discussion. We have one item, and it is discussion and possible direction to the clerk of the board regarding the timeline, process for auctioning, and terms and conditions for the sale of the unsold parcels from the 2023 tax deed land sale held from September 11th through September 22nd, 2023. And it looks like Sharon Gilman, are you going to start us off today? The Deputy County Administrator / interim clerk of the board.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Crosby, English, and Judd, thank you for this opportunity to seek direction from the Board of Supervisors as to how we should conduct the next phase of the tax deed land sale. The tax deed land sale was conducted originally from September 11th through the 22nd. The public notice appeared on August 30th and September 6th as required by statute. There was a 2-week marketing period where the public could see the list of properties, and that began on August 30th. And then at that time, there were 42 units which made up the list. Those units, some had several parcels as part of the unit, so that's not necessarily 42 parcels, but 42 units. Then those 42, 36 had successful bidders, and we'll be bringing that list of 36 bids to the board on November 14th for your approval of the sales. So 6 remaining properties are on the list. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are off Leslie Canyon Road, and the last unit 42 is made up of several parcels, and that's the Miracle Valley Bible College property area. So the Miracle Valley one in particular has had a great deal of public interest. From the clerk of the board's office, we would like to be able to go to the next phase in as clear and transparent manner as possible to be efficient for our staff as well as for the public so that we're not causing any confusion. And that's why we're seeking direction today. So there's a couple ways we could do that. We would like to hold, because of the significant public interest, we would like to hold an online auction for all the remaining properties, and that'll be through public surplus again, just as the previous auction was. We were thinking we could do this, considering our calendar with the board, we could do this in January of 2024. This would allow us time for another 2-week marketing period and then a 1-week auction for the 6 properties or 6 units. We would also like to have a bid deposit, which we did not do this past time. We hope that that bid deposit would allow us to only have serious bidders. The bid deposit would be applied to not all properties, but we could select which properties we apply that to and set the amount. The deposit would be refunded to anyone who was not successful with the highest bid. So it's a way to encourage serious bidders that without driving up the price unnecessarily. let's see, another option that we could do in our terms and conditions is to allow for a reserve on the Miracle Valley property in particular. We do set, as a course of preparing an auction, we set minimum values on the properties. And so the reserve would be essentially that minimum value, but we could have a lower starting bid just to get the bidding going. Those are some of the things that we added to the terms and conditions that were attached to your work session packet. Those terms and conditions are highlighted in red that are the changes. And I will take any questions if you'd like to discuss.
Where are these items highlighted in red that you refer to?
On the terms and conditions draft.
Okay, okay.
I didn't get one of those.
It was attached.
And I don't have one either.
I can get you a copy.
That's okay. I think that,
Let me ask a question. The Miracle Valley in particular was turned over to the state because of $500,000 worth of taxes that were unpaid. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And so our focus should be, or at least we've discussed this in the past with properties that are turned over to the state because of lost revenue to the school districts or the fire districts or whomever the taxes were supposed to go to. Our goal should be to get it back on the tax roll so that it's a tax producing property as it was in the beginning. Is that not?
Yes, that's why the state has.
Okay, so
that
it looks as
responsibility.
though this last time around, I don't know if we were spoofed or what, by these people that were bidding but couldn't come up with the money. And then you go to the next one and they bid, but they couldn't come up with the money. And so I certainly think that that's a good idea to have some kind of a deposit. I'm wondering how you would decide that, but it probably can't be a percentage of what we think the property is worth, but it needs to be a significant enough amount on a property like that that they would think twice, 5,000, 10,000. Because if you haven't got that to put up front, then you can't afford 15 acres anywhere.
Right. I think Public Surplus gave us, based on what other online auction in counties are doing, is between 500 and 1,000, depending on the value of the property.
I have a question for Mr. Correa. And I know that you're not a real estate lawyer, but how does this proposal of a deposit differ from what we might call in the real estate business earnest money?
Similar to the earnest money, Tom, that's right.
Okay. I believe Ms. English's points are well taken, and so it would be a matter of deciding the amount. What I wrote down here in my notes was 1,000 to 2,000 that you don't get back if you make an unsubstantiated bid, but you do get it back if you get outbid by a real bid. You get it added to your purchase if you win the auction. And so it would just be the amount that we would be discussing as far as that goes. That sounds like, does Ms. Judd have any comments on the amount of earnest money or deposit?
I think it needs to be more. I think when we're referring to $500 to $1,000 for that security or earnest money, that has to be for properties that aren't as valuable as this one. I don't know what the successful bid will be, but even if it's the minimum bid that we have listed here, the $325,000, I think it'd be substantial, like what Supervisor English said, the 5,000 even to 10,000 range. If they have the money to pay for the property, if they are a successful bidder, then they have that much money to put down to be a legitimate bidder in the auction. So if that's legal, then I suggest the higher amount. Then also I have one other comment. So there was some comments about it being a closed bid auction and where no one could see who else was bidding. And it appeared that to some people that maybe they were hacking into the system last time, and they kind of knew who else was bidding. Now that could have been any other way, social media and other ways to know who was bidding on it. Does it have to be closed, or can the people who are bidding be disclosed, especially as they were disclosing themselves anyway? But is there any leeway we have with that that auction program that we use?
I was sorry. I was just speaking with Deputy Clerk Laura Lowenheim about
Oh, sorry.
that. So I think that's the standard practice, is to allow people to create their login and reveal whatever profile information they wish to reveal. So we have not required it. I don't think the system allows for that.
Okay.
But we can look into it further to give you a better answer.
I kind of suspected that it would be that way. That is the way it is with auctions for homes. When you're doing an online auction, it's not like you're standing in a room with all the other bidders. Online auctions are just that way. And I don't think in any way that that's uncouth or unethical. I'm just saying that that was one of the comments coming out. So anyway, that was a question I had.
Well, I heard something this morning and I want to comment on that if it wasn't clearly understood by what I said earlier, that people were looking to us to say, okay, you could have bidding just for nonprofits. Well, that totally goes against the reason that we have these in the first place. It's to put them on the tax rolls, not to sell it to someone who's going to take it off of the tax rolls. Now, if they buy it in the regular process and they are a bona fide nonprofit or religious organization, and they go through that process, fine. But we cannot specifically designate it for any particular group of people. And that would be a no-no on our part to specify that you had to be a nonprofit in order to bid in this process. So I just wanted to negate that fact right up front, is that we can't do that.
Again, I believe Ms. English's points are well taken. The point in what I wanted to do for the nonprofits was to give them the opportunity to buy it and not preclude anybody that from buying it that might otherwise want to buy it. And I was wondering if Mr. Coxworth, did you have any comments for us this morning, or did you want to? Could you? Let me see. Would you care to discuss further abatement with us? Okay. And we just won't talk about that.
I wanted to make a comment again that has to do with real estate law. What you both have said and agreed to, and I agreed to it also, is we can't steer certain buyers to a property, nor can we preclude certain buyers from making a bid. We're selling that property, and we can't say, I'm sorry, you're from the wrong country, or you have the wrong background, or we just can't do that in real estate. And I'm understanding that this is a legitimate real estate practice, and I hope Mr. Correa is kind of nodding his head over there. So I feel like we have to follow all the real estate laws. Is that true?
Peggy, I just want to point out that there's a statute on point 42-18303A, which talks about the process for selling this type of land that's held by the state. And it doesn't allow to, any basis for excluding anybody from the auction.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, I agree. And to answer Tom's question, I think that that could fairly fit within the broad description in our work session today, which is the timeline process, terms and conditions for, this property. So if Dan wants to speak.
Okay, Mr. Coxworth, I don't insist that you bring anything to us because I know that you haven't prepared and you haven't thought it through. If you care to speak, you may.
Really, Supervisor Crosby, members of the board, just to answer any questions that you might have. There is significant asbestos on the property. It's a hazard. A lot of it is damaged. The county is trying to get rid of this property. I understand that. The new owner of that property should be aware of the hazards that exist. In addition, there's underground fuel tanks. The opportunity for the county to clean up this property is now. We will never have this opportunity again. There's no saying who will buy it and their intentions for the property and whether they will clean this up. My stance all along in previous work sessions is it's in the best interest of the county and the community to do what we can to clean the property up prior to sale. In order for that to happen, you would have to pull this property from the auction of January. It would take some time, and then probably put this property back on auction next year, next summer.
What would it cost to get rid of the asbestos?
So the county's already bore the cost of removing the asbestos of the dome, and we're removing asbestos that's greater than 1%. Less than 1% you can sometimes work with. You still have to meet an OSHA standard to protect workers. But anything greater than 1% is an EPA standard. So we've already bore the cost of removing the asbestos from the dome of about $17,000. To remove the asbestos from the remaining buildings would fall less than $100,000, about $90,000 to $100,000. So it's not cheap. It's not cheap for us. It's not going to be cheap for a new property owner either, if they choose to do this correctly and bear that expense and clean up this hazard.
I'm satisfied with that answer. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Coxworth. Ms. Gilman, you spoke, I believe you said November 14th and January. And so could you go over what those dates are about?
Sure. So November 14th is when the other properties that have sold will come before the board for approval of the sale. And then we process the deeds over to the new owners after that. So that's everything else that was on the list that went through the auction, and we've received payments and everything's being processed now to put those exhibits together for you on the November 14th meeting.
Okay.
And then the January timeline I mentioned was for when we thought we could do another online auction for the remaining 6 units from
Okay.
that list.
And that does not include Miracle Valley.
That would include Miracle Valley at
Okay.
this time, unless you give me different direction.
Okay, then from what Mr. Coxworth is saying, he is suggesting that we postpone it further to address abatement issues, perhaps to next summer, is what I understood from Mr. Coxworth.
Right. So the next time we do a tax deed land sale would be probably September of next year. We get that list a new list from the treasurer, and we can leave things on the list that didn't sell this time or remove them and not put them up for auction again. There's lots of different ways we could go about it, but typically we get a whole new list from the treasurer, and then we go about doing another auction this time next year.
Okay. So is there any other discussion from the board about postponing until basically next September for Miracle Valley?
One thing that's always bothered me from the beginning on this, once I found out there was asbestos there and that there were hazards, is that I realized that we can sell these tax deed or these tax properties as is. But who in the public, even if we tell them that there's asbestos there and they must clean it up, will they do that? So as a public servant, I feel bad about offering something that is not safe. That's always bothered me to put this out there. And I realized that we were stopped from the abatement because they wanted it left like it was, because so they could do some research in it being a historical property. But historical and hazard are not necessarily synonymous, you know, so I don't know that we would change the historical part of it by getting rid of the asbestos. And it really bothers me that it's an expensive process. We did that at BDI Airport. Everything that's old has asbestos. So we're talking about it costing us $100,000 to clean up the asbestos. Or the option is we sell it to someone knowing that they've got $100,000 worth of asbestos to clean up, or the public is at risk. Because if you're going to operate it as something, then people will be on that property and subject to asbestos. Because when it's friable, when it's in the air, it's very harmful. And when it's not covered up and it's not taken care of, anyone who is on that property is subject to, and specifically since we've talked about it and we know the liability is there, you know, we've taken that on already. You know, we've talked about asbestos from the day we talked about this property, or it became known to us. So I guess I'm of the opinion that we need to seriously think about cleaning the property up before we offer it back at auction.
I believe you're right. And Ms. Judd, did you have any comments about abatement?
I do. I don't want to change the property in any way, but I also don't see that cleaning up the asbestos would ruin the property. Mr. Coxworth also mentioned underground tanks. Those are very, very expensive to remove as well. And I don't know if we're going to be able to go there, but I think having a year, not just, you know, waiting till next September is a good idea. For one thing, it gives our bidders a chance to put their funding together and finance together. So maybe they would have more opportunities. So I would suggest we delay it till next cycle, next tax sale cycle. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Judd. I agree with that, and I believe Ms. English agrees with that also, waiting until next September to try an auction again.
Well, I'm not willing to just wait. I'm willing to wait only if we're going to clean up the property before we try and sell it. I think this is a unique circumstance that we have great knowledge of the harm that could be done by us selling this. The public knows that, and we are public servants, and so we should try to keep this harm away from the public as much as possible.
I believe, Ms. Judd, you concurred with what Ms. English just said, did you not?
Yes, I'm okay with the abatement. I was going to ask a question, though, Mr. Coxworth. Is there a possibility that we can get funding to do that, or is this just right out of your budget?
Correct. Through the general fund, my department is funded with hazard abatement dollars that we could use. The county is also the recipient of a revolving loan fund. Part of that money could be granted to the county for the purpose of cleaning this up. I don't want to commit to that. I do want to check with the EPA because of the status of the property. But every year, the board does give me resources. Typically, it's $100,000. This year is at $200,000. We do have a large project, BDI, that we're using a lot of that money for. So the resources are there this budget cycle and then going into next budget cycle prior to the next auction of late next summer.
Okay, Ms. Gilman and Mr. Coxworth, are you satisfied that you have direction on abatement?
I am. I just would ask, we will likely have a work session. I would suggest where Mr. Coxworth could lay out those abatement plans for the board before we proceed with any.
Well, one thing about the gas tanks, I mean, that's a community hazard. So if those have been leaking, as many older ones do, I mean, that's something that needs to be taken care of also, because it's going into the community water supply. It's not specific just to that piece of property. So we don't know the cost of that. And And that's as important as the asbestos. Because
Okay.
that, you can't see that. You can't see asbestos either, but we have knowledge of both. And I think we need to look at taking care of both.
Okay, so would you say that our direction should be to estimate cost for removing the tanks?
Right.
And look at contamination?
Right.
Okay.
And then put it on the agenda for us to appropriate money to do that if that's what we choose to do.
And then just to clarify, those other properties that are of not been the subject of so much discussion today, those ones out in Leslie Canyon, I would feel more comfortable just doing those as an over-the-counter sale for the rest of the year, since they're of a lower value and easy to manage for our office.
That's usually the procedure, you know, what's left over from the auction, as long as they're parts of subdivisions and small properties, have it over the counter so that people, if they want it, can come in and, because they all have a bottom line price on them, just like anything else.
And so there will not be an online auction in January, just to clarify for everyone. Okay.
There won't be.
Okay, so the next subject that I'd like to come back to is earnest money or deposit. And we heard figures from 500 to 10,000. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, since we won't have the online auction, and this will be, I guess it's good to know for come next year this time, if this property is on it, how we want it, or other properties that we want to handle that. But I can bring it to you at that time, when earlier than like probably August or so, when we are ready to start preparing for that next tax deed land sale auction, because those terms don't apply to an over-the-counter sale.
Okay, that's fine. So we want to postpone that discussion until a later date. Is that correct?
That's my suggestion.
I think it's been brought up now, and we're certainly aware of the time, effort, and energy that was put into an auction that, you know, when we didn't have that in place, resulted in more time, effort, and energy. So I think we need to seriously look at that on at least properties that are valued to be, I don't know what the number would be, maybe $100,000. So that'd be one way we could judge it, was what's the ultimate value of that property? Not a percentage, but, and then decide, well, that, if they're interested in a property for 100,000, surely they could put up 5 as a bidder. And it would be returned, or like you say, you know, put on the
Like-
purchase price if they are the successful bidder. So we can write up some regulations so that people don't think that we're doing it just for a specific person.
Any further discussion? Madam Judge?
I agree with that. And we'll address that when we get closer to the auction next year. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, is it appropriate to talk about a more thorough inspection by potential bidders?
This work session was about the timeline and process for auctioning the terms and conditions of the sale.
Okay,
I think when it's been cleaned up and we're looking at an auction, that would be an appropriate time to
okay,
approach that. But as for right now, remember, we've talked about this being a hazard,
right.
so we don't want anybody on there. Or
I
I
understand.
wouldn't think you would, because remember, when we're talking about the hazard that you can't see,
Mhm.
the people in the funny suits will be in there taking care of that, you know, not other people just looking around.
Okay, well, for the record, let's make sure that topic is brought up for more thorough inspections in the future.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Judd, did you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, and Ms. English? Okay, hearing no further discussion, this meeting is adjourned.
Next meeting,
The next meeting will be at 2:00 for a BOS executive conference room regarding potential drafting of a county burn ban ordinance and fireworks ban ordinance. Adjourned.